This is the beautiful new Bell 206 from Flywing, and today we're going to test it out do RC style. We're going to be flying this thing FPV from inside the cockpit, turning it into a heavy lift helicopter, then flying it in full manual mode and probably crashing it. Helicopters fly very differently from anything else out there, and most of the time you're seeing these things being flown with GPS assistance. In full manual mode, it's a completely different animal. As you can see, these blades are made of beautiful carbon fiber, which makes them really stiff and really light. Unfortunately, it means in a crash, they're going to get destroyed. And that's the risk you take flying one of these helicopters, because when they crash really badly. And that's why most people rely on this included GPS to keep it stable, which we'll be doing in the beginning, but not at the end. In order to take a closer look at what makes this thing tick, we need to pull this module out of this beautiful body. I can see a lot of this is glued in. Hopefully the module itself isn't. I think I see some screws we can take out to get it out of there though. One thing to keep in mind is these helicopters are built kind of differently from an RC car, especially on a larger scale. The helicopter industry is kind of behind everybody else. So you're still going to see things like wood and glue all over this thing. One thing I noticed right off the bat is this cable is not plugged all the way in. That would probably be a problem, and that's why it's really important to go over these things before you fly them. Again, unlike with an RC car, the stakes are really high if something goes wrong. These helicopters are largely hand assembled, which is how you end up with situations like this screw that's stuck under the receiver. I suspect this receiver was supposed to be set further back so that wasn't covered up, which means we're going to have to rip it off of here now. Hopefully it's not on too tight. If you're going to work on one of these larger helicopters, I strongly recommend hand tools, as this stuff's often just screwed into wood, and it can really easily be stripped out if you're not careful. I want to thank Razor Dawn Flash for sending this to me to share with you guys. This helicopter is obviously pretty big and pretty expensive, but they've got a bunch of cheaper options too. Now hopefully with those screws out, this will just slide right on out of here. With that module out of there, you can see there's really not much to this helicopter. The only electronics left behind is this tail rotor motor. This thing's really important for keeping the helicopter in the air. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but this is where all the magic really happens. As you can see, this is one complex unit, and there's a lot going on here. First of all, as you can see, we have a big, beefy, brushless main rotor motor. That's got a nice looking aluminum helical gear that connects to this big plastic gear. That gear is connected to a main shaft that goes all the way up to where the blades connect. So when the motor spins, it spins those blades. Now on a full-size helicopter and on a lot of other larger model helicopters, this motor will also drive that tail rotor, but not in this case. One part that might look familiar to you is the receiver. This is just a fairly standard flight receiver and works basically exactly the same as any ground receiver in an RC car. However, there's only one connection going from this receiver out, and that goes to this flight controller, or flybarless controller as it's usually called. That controller takes all the signals from the receiver, adds its own special magic to it. Those signals go to 3 servos, which run what's known as a swash plate. Each one of the servos controls 1/3 of the swash plate, and that swash plate is connected with a bearing up to the head. As you can see, as I move these servos, it moves the arms that control the blades, but as this spins, those arms actually move as well. This means that the blades are being dynamically controlled as they spin by this swash plate. To control a helicopter, we have this transmitter, and these transmitters come in 2 different setup flavors. As you can see with this one, both sticks auto center, and that means this will fly in a very similar manner to a DJI drone. Basically, you tell it to take off, it takes off. This increases altitude, this decreases altitude. This will move you forward and back, left and right, and this rotates you left and right. However, if you go into 3D mode on here, and we're gonna have to adjust something inside the transmitter to do this, you go into full manual mode. And that means when you let go of the stick, the helicopter does not auto center, and instead of controlling altitude, this controls the pitch of the blades. In full manual mode, this thing is still doing a little bit to help you out, but you're really the one in control. And that's when things get really interesting, because when the helicopter is coming towards you, half the controls are reversed, and it's very easy to get mixed up. We'll see just how well this 3D option works out in just a few minutes. Now, due to the physical law of equal and opposite reaction, when this thing's spinning around one direction, it's trying to make the whole rest of it go the other direction. Because this is attached to the helicopter is also trying to turn in the opposite direction. A quadcopter doesn't have this problem because half the blades spin one way and half the blades spin the other way, meaning those forces are canceled out automatically. Most helicopters, including this one, don't have counter-rotating blades, which is why we have a tail rotor. Simply put, this spinning tail rotor creates a force on the tail that's able to counteract that turning force created by the equal and opposite reaction of the blades. Most full-size helicopters and some model helicopters spin this off of the main motor, meaning that it spins proportionally to that motor, so they actually change the pitch of the propeller back here to create different amounts of thrust. This has a separate brushless motor controlled by that flight controller, which basically does the same thing just by increasing and decreasing its speed. Now, there are a lot of other inherent wild and wacky forces on a helicopter, including things like the blade going forward, creating more lift than the blade going backward, and a ton of other stuff, but there are plenty of videos on YouTube that talk about those forces on full-size helicopters. They're definitely worth taking a look at if you're interested. And if you find cool, different videos like this interesting, make sure you get subscribed because we've got some really neat stuff coming that you're not going to want to miss. Before we put this back together, I want to take a look at these screws and make sure they have thread locker on them. Again, a failure on this is going to be far more catastrophic than on basically anything else. And yeah, you can see we have pre-applied thread locker on here. So I'll just spot check a few more of these. Let's get this put back together. All right, guys, everything looks good to me. So let's go ahead and get this module put back in. I'm going to charge up a battery and let's go see if this thing flies normally before we start doing stupid things to it. All right, here we go. This is my very first time flipping this switch. Hopefully it goes okay. This thing is pretty intimidating. Let me get right behind it. Okay, I think it's up to speed. Let's see if it'll take off. Whoa, we're in the air. Okay. All right, it's pretty stable so far. Goes to the right. Goes to the left. It seems to be handling the wind pretty well. I don't really want to get much closer to it, but so far it seems very, very stable in this GPS mode, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. Now we are definitely going to be putting this thing in other modes, including full manual mode, where I want to see just how fast it'll go, but let's see what kind of performance we get in this GPS mode. Pushing the stick forward. That's about halfway. That feels pretty good. It's definitely holding itself well against the wind. It is quite breezy out here. Let's bring it back. Yeah, so far it feels really, really nice. The thing sounds absolutely awesome. Let me get closer and listen to this thing. Sounds so mean. Let's fly it around just a little bit. And this is where things can get confusing because now it's facing toward me, so half the controls are backwards, and in full manual mode, that can be very, very confusing. We're gonna do some simulator practice before we go into manual mode, but like I said, we've got some cool stuff to try before that. Let's get some speed up. That's full throttle. As you can see, there's really nothing around me right now, and that's really, really important, especially as you get started flying something like this. You really don't want your day to end because you ran into a tree or a telephone pole. Having lots of room around you will make the entire experience a lot more pleasant. And this thing does seem to fly very pleasantly right out of the box. It seems well tuned, and I'm not having any issues with it whatsoever. Again, this is because we have that GPS control though. I'm basically just asking it to do things, and it's doing those things all by itself. There's really not much to it, but this thing is absolutely beautiful. It flies scale, and this is a lot of fun. I'm honestly a little bit sad that we might end up crashing it doing stupid things to it, but we do stupid things on this channel all the time, and we crash stuff all the time, so let's go see if we can do some FPV with this awesome helicopter. And to fly this FPV, we're going to use this self-stabilized head tracking system from Cadex. We're going to put it inside the cockpit, which should be really awesome. That is, of course, assuming we can actually fit it in here. Not only do I have a space restriction, but we've also got a weight restriction. This thing needs to stay balanced in order to fly right, and I don't think we're going to be able to do it weight-wise or balance-wise just by putting it on top of this battery. And yeah, as you can see, it's definitely going to hit the canopy, so we need to do something else. In order to get it significantly lower, maybe we can reorient this battery. Hopefully maybe it'll fit in here sideways. No, I don't think that's going to work. We could cut this out and that might be okay, but that doesn't really fix our weight problem. This is going to add a significant amount of weight to the front, and so we need to remove some weight as well. This R-line battery is only about 2/3 the capacity of the stock battery. This is a really good battery though, and I think we can fit it in here sideways, which gives us a bunch of room here in the front to mount that FPV camera. I'm just going to take this battery and make a little mark in in front of it here. That way we know how far back we can go with the camera mount. And to keep things classy, we're going to use this really nice piece of matte finish carbon fiber for that mount. And to make that mount, we're just going to take a few measurements here in the front and in the back. Take some measurements off our screws for the gimbal. Now we're going to go into CAD and design this up. This is going to be a fairly straightforward design. And then we move on to something I'm really excited about, and that's my brand new Carvera from Makera. Unlike the Carvera Air, this thing is larger, has a built-in vacuum cleaner for chip evacuation, and most importantly has a 6-slot automatic tool changer. As you can see here, first it's going to pull the wireless probe out. It's going to use that to automatically probe the surface of the material, but then when it's done, it's going to put the probe away. Then it's going to go grab the first tool that I programmed in, make the cuts, drill the holes, put that tool away, and then go grab the second tool. In this case, it's a chamfer bit, and chamfer all the edges to make a nice clean part without me ever having to go in and touch anything. And here's the finished product. As you can see, the edges look really, really clean. And overall, this was very easy to cut on the Carvera. One thing I want to mention is that dust from carbon fiber is extremely bad for you. And when you're cutting it on a CNC machine like the Carvera, it's going to make very fine particulate, and you need to filter that particulate out somehow. As you can see here, I'm using a DeWalt Stealth Sonic. This has both a fine particulate bag in it and a HEPA filter. Even though the Carvera does have a built-in vacuum, and it's fine for things like wood and metal, I wouldn't trust it for carbon fiber, so just keep that in mind. With that PSA over with, now we can talk about design flaws, and the biggest one with this plate is it doesn't actually fit. It's the right size and shape, but there isn't any actual way to get it underneath this lip. I think I'll be able to spread these sides apart and just barely cram it in there, but obviously this is not the best design. The other big problem I realize is with the plate in here, you're not going to be able to get the battery in and out, so the battery is going to be trapped in there. Again, for this testing, it's not going to be a problem, but if I was going to set up a permanent solution, we'd come up with something different, probably some way to permanently mount the system in the canopy. But for now, this will work just fine. What I'm going to do is go ahead and take these little rubber shock mounts off of the gimbal. Then we can mount these to the plate just using some standard M2 screws. Give the plate surface a quick cleanup, install some VHB, and then let's see if we can't cram this thing into the fuselage. We'll add a strip of Velcro to the middle of this battery. Then we can permanently slide that in here. And finally, assuming I got my measurements right, the gimbal should just slot right in here. All right, with that installed and at least the wiring temporarily organized, let's see if it's going to fit under the canopy. This is the big test. And look at that, guys. It fits and it clears. This white stripe's going to be a problem, though. Fortunately, that's just a sticker we can take straight off of there. There we go, a nice clear canopy, and the camera might even be able to look out these bottom windows too. We'll have to see. I am a little nervous that some of these radios are going to interfere with each other, but you know what? There's only one way to find out. Let me finish tidying up this wire, and let's go see how this thing flies first person. All right, guys, well, hopefully this works. As you can see, we can see every place out of the helicopter. It's pretty windy out here. I'm really hoping this thing flies well. There we go, starting up. You can see the blades spinning up. I am very nervous. As we do more and more risky stuff, we're getting further and further away from skill and further into luck. And I think we're pretty well into luck at this point. So let's see what happens. I think we're at full throttle and let's take off. All right, we're in the air and we are flying. Oh my gosh, this is pretty awesome. I can see down the ground here. It is definitely windy out. Turning around, as you can see, I can see myself. I can look out the sides of the helicopter. Let's fly around a little bit. I do need to avoid my drone, which is right in front of us. You can see it up there. Right there in front of us. That's pretty cool. Let's fly a little bit further away here. And yeah, so far this is working out very, very well. As you can see, when the helicopter makes its moves to stop and start, the camera is very stabilized, and overall, this seems really amazing. I've tried flying helicopters FPV before, and really it didn't work very well, and that's mostly because the FPV camera wasn't stabilized, and it just felt like crap. It was really, really bouncy, and overall, it just wasn't a good experience. This, on the other hand, feels like I'm flying an actual helicopter, and it really feels good. Let's get a high speed run. Full throttle. All right, guys, I am not gonna push my luck with this any further. We've got a pretty small battery on the FPV system. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and land now, and let's see how much weight this helicopter can carry. That actually went a lot smoother than I thought it was going to. I didn't get a very long flight time because we used this fairly small battery to power the FPV system, and I was more than a little concerned that we were going to run out of juice in that battery and end up losing the FPV signal. If that had happened, we would have crashed this helicopter. Let's see how much battery we actually used, though. Plug it into the old tester. We can see we used hardly any. We could have flown for a lot longer. So this actually is a viable setup, and the FPV on the helicopter was a lot of fun. Like I said, the biggest problem with FPV on helicopters in the past has been stability, and just like with Surface RC, this gimbaled setup really fixes that issue. Overall, so far, I'm very impressed with this helicopter, but the next two things are going to be quite a bit more dangerous. I'm definitely nervous about flying this thing in full manual mode, but before we do that, I definitely want to see if we can pick up an RC car with it. That's really going to mess with the weight and balance of this thing, so to give it the best chance possible, I'm taking the entire FPV system back out, because even though we had it fairly well balanced, it really wasn't designed to handle that kind of weight, so we're just going to run it with the original battery in the original position. Now to try to pick up an RC car, I've got these magnets on a string, and our first victim is going to be this little crawler. This doesn't weigh too much, though it still might be too much for the helicopter. To pick it up, I'm just going to take this big magnet and slide it under here, and hopefully that'll make this little crawler take flight. Let's go find out. All right, guys, we are well outside of skill and deep into luck territory now. Let's see what happens. We've got the car way over there, and let's see if we can go get it. Spin her up. I really hope we don't catch any of those strings when we take off, because that will be immediate disaster. Fortunately, with the GPS lock, it should be a little bit easier to control than that other drone I made was. All right, we're flying. We take off. And we've got the magnet underneath us. Wires are already tangled up, but we're going to try it anyway. I'm going to slowly fly over there. I really don't want to crash this. It is very stable though. Even in this fairly small area, I think we're going to have no problem attaching to this car. Whether or not we're going to be able to pick it up is a totally different story though. All right, let's get close to it. It is pretty breezy out here. Just on top of it, and let's drop her down. Let me get behind it so I can angle it a little bit better. Oh, so close! It's like the worst claw game ever. We've got limited flight time too. Okay guys, with enough time I could definitely attach to it, but that's not what this is about. So I went ahead and attached it manually. Let's see if we can actually pick this car up and move it. We could have a big crash right away here. Let's see. Taking off. Oh, it disconnected. All right, guys, we've got it jammed in there, so it's not coming off this time. Let's see what happens. She's up to speed. Here we go. And she has got her in the air. I think this is about the limit of what this helicopter can carry, though. It does not sound super thrilled about what's going on. But as you can see, we have picked up this little RC car, and this looks pretty darn cool. Look at it carrying it around. Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, even though it sounds like it's working very hard, it is quite stable. You can hear those blades really churning through the air, though. Listen. That's really pushing it. But yeah, guys, we've got this thing in the air, and set up correctly, we could definitely use this to retrieve at least a small RC car. Now, the real trick is, can I land it without crashing into the car? Let's get the car on the ground first. And then we need to land next to it. Pretty darn smooth, guys. Guys, I have to say, I've been really impressed with this helicopter, but the last step in the gauntlet of danger for this thing is by far the scariest. And that's because we're going to be switching to full manual control. In order to do that, first we need to modify the transmitter. And that's because in manual mode, you fly the helicopter completely differently than in GPS mode. And that's what really makes it so dangerous. Instead of having the controls where you're basically asking the helicopter what to do, in manual mode, we're going to be telling the helicopter what to do. This doesn't ask the helicopter to go up and down. This just changes the pitch of the blades, and we can actually go negative on the pitch, which will crash it immediately. In order to do that, though, we need to take the spring out of this stick. To get to that adjustment, we just need to take 4 screws out of here, and the back should lift right off of here. As you can see, the spring for this stick is right here. We just need to remove that, and there we go. Now that doesn't spring back to the middle, but it also doesn't hold its position. There should be a friction plate right here, which isn't there, so let me whip something up real quick. There we go. This piece of zip tie isn't ideal, but it definitely gets the job done. The transmitter is ready to rock. Now, even I'm not crazy enough to switch into full manual mode without some practice, so let's move over to AccuRC, and I'm going to give myself one day in this simulator to get enough training to hopefully fly this thing away from us, towards us, and side to side without crashing. Things are starting out pretty well. I've flown quite a few quadcopters which feel fairly similar to this, so it's not too bad. However, helicopters again are a lot less forgiving, and when you turn around like I am right now, it is very, very confusing. Half the controls are now reversed because the helicopter's pointing at you, but the other half aren't. And as you can see here, I've crashed quite a bit, but now I've got just enough confidence to feel like I can fly this helicopter by hand, so let's go give this thing its final test and hopefully not its final flight. Okay guys, we've got everything set up on the transmitter. I've got about a 50% success rate on the simulator. Let's see if we can do a little bit better on the real thing. All right, she's spinning up. She's up to speed. All right, here we go. Whoa, crap. Okay, so this is basically like balancing on the head of a pin, and it is already very, very nerve-wracking. I am not too sure how many tricks we're going to be able to do with this. I might just be happy keeping it in the air, because this is definitely a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, and it is way harder than it is in the simulator. This is really, really not easy. I think I might just be happy holding it in a hover. Maybe we'll try flying forward a little bit. Let's go forward just a tiny bit. Okay. All right. Let's bring it back. We haven't crashed yet. And we've almost crashed. Oh, God. Okay. All right. We haven't crashed. We haven't crashed. Guys, I think I'm going to take a win on this and put this back down on the ground before I wreck it, because I'm not sure I've got the skill to do anything else. Well, there we go, guys. The Flywing Bell 206 from Razordawn Flash. This thing is really, really cool. I'm not sure how well it comes across in the video, but flying it manually was extremely difficult, far more difficult than it was in the simulator. And there was going to be a very fine line between what I was doing and then just immediately crashing it. And I didn't want to just intentionally crash this beautiful helicopter. And that's because I want to keep flying this thing. I want to get better at it and maybe even upgrade to the new Flywing G2 flight controller. It's supposed to be even better than this, though I didn't have any problems with this one myself. And with all that being said, I had an absolute blast with this thing. FPV was incredible. Heavy lift was a lot of fun. And I think I can get better at that manual control. And I think that's where it's really going to be at in the long run with flying this thing. GPS control is fun, but manual control really makes you feel like you're the pilot. I really loved having you join me in this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you get subscribed, leave me a comment, let me know what you think about this helicopter, and I'll see you in one of these videos.